for taking the time to hear from us today. I do have a few documents that I would like to hand to you. I don't know if you've seen yet communicated from the staff a picture of the development. I think it helps. I also have the original complaint by the state of California in 1981. Oh, is that, yes. I'm almost done. In 1981, and it details the decades of good faith effort and negotiation that were put into working with Mr. Uccelli before they brought the action. Attached to it are many exhibits, and this, I believe, was in a later discovery memo, many exhibits that show for years in the 60s and 70s that the Army Corps of Engineers repeatedly advised that he didn't have title, he needed permission. So I'd like to introduce these. Kim, sorry. So I do want to clarify that it's absolutely a correct statement that we are not opposed to their land-based initiative at all. We respect the right of Mrs. Uccelli to retire and to sell the property for the person who wants to buy it to develop. We're not opposed to the residences. We do believe that this was fast-tracked at the city level, and there's a lot of talk about for sale for 10 years. There's not a for sale sign at the property. I've been looking at it to move down there since '96, and I've never seen a for sale sign. There's a hallway with all kinds of commendations and newspaper articles, and there's nothing up there that shows the one article one time that was run where Pete Uccelli in the Chronicle said that he wanted to grant an option to the developer, which is the Pauls Corporation of Denver, and represented by Mr. Paul Powers, and he's here today. So that was a long time ago. In 2002, there was a clause added to the back side of the 4-page lease that said, since we are no longer admitting liveaboards, your status here is a favor. And that was in 2002, and for 10 years, they admitted liveaboards by the hundreds. And when I say that, they come and go. There might be cruisers, there might be recreational boaters. And this is not at all. The issue is the public trust use of the outer harbor. And that is the issue here for the State Land Commission, what the commission will decide on when the proper application is made by the developer, which or owner, which we hope will be sooner rather than later. So we were advised of this development. Since 2002, there was one proposal in 2003 to build a very large, like a little city on this whole inlet, like a Redwood Shores, and the voters voted it down in 2004. When they voted that down, both the ordinance of Redwood City and the initiative, the liveaboards and the recreational boaters, the commercial harbor would have stayed. Since that vote down by the people, there has not one time been brought to the people a new proposed development. There was an effort in 2008 that was never made known to anybody. Due to the economic conditions, the developer withdrew it, went back to Denver, and not until this July 2012 has anyone ever heard of a development since 2004 when the voters voted it down. And one thing I do want to slip in there, we've been out there, we talked to the voters, and we thought, well, let's just see what they think, the people of Redwood City. Do you want to keep the outer harbor commercial and accessible to the public instead of private dock slips for high-end residential luxury condos? And we got 600 signatures in a long weekend, and we got 1,000 change.org support. And we haven't been back out there because we have been going to the Planning Commission and to the City Council. We do have an appeal, but you're absolutely right, Chair Gordon. Our desire is that we work with them to perhaps have a few fewer apartments so that there's enough parking to keep the outer harbor commercial. And so what I wanted to say is that it was very much fast-tracked. When it came back this July, we were actively deceived for 2 months and told that there had been no, permit filed. We were met with on September 20th. The State Lands Commission was met with on September 18th, 2 days before. The neighbors and the car dealer were met with 3 weeks before the most important parties in this dispute. The city attorney, the assistant city attorney in the open hearing public record has said, if the State Lands Commission does not consent to the outer lease there is the one that was on the Leslie Salt land. That requires affirmative consent and has more of the traditional terms and conditions of the standard State Lands Commission lease. That requires affirmative consent. The other ones allow transfer, but that would only be transfer of the use that's consistent and permitted, which is a commercial harbor. It says it in the lease. And there's a lot of different provisions in the lease. It was actually, mandated by an act of the California legislature in 1983, which was emergency legislation. And, there's all kinds of provisions of that act, and one of them declares the existing commercial harbor and marina open for the public to be consistent with the public trust. So there's an act of the statute. I don't know, Mr. Henning just made an argument that for 50 years they've been using this marina to make millions and millions of dollars inconsistent with the public trust. That's the unavoidable conclusion to that argument. So here we have, it's an existing use, it's consistent with the public trust, and with people, we have somebody who's going to read a statement, a Vietnam veteran's lived there 20 years, has paid $250,000 in rent. He could find where to pay his rent. And, he is at the VA today because he's having a surgery. He needs to go to the VA 3 times a week. We have a woman that couldn't come here today because she was hit by a car out of the Villas, which is next door, and she's been in just terrible pain for years. And she's unable to work, and so they're living on one income where she used to be a very vibrant phlebotomist, and she can't come here. We have other people who specifically asked this June, hey, we saw some surveyors, are you selling the property? And they were told no. And so they acted in their detrimental reliance, and they have a houseboat, actually a floating home, that there's nowhere to put it now because all of the other slips have been filled. So Mr. Hannig raises a lot of factual arguments that, people fled in the first few weeks and took up all the remaining slips. So that's what I want to say is that the city attorney, when I said in open hearing, she said, if you don't consent to the outer lease and you don't approve the change in use, this particular permit that has been issued will go away. And so that means everyone can go back to the drawing table and say, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you ask the voters? And so what I wanted to say is when we go out and we ask them, since we've been in the press, we've been in, on TV, LA Times, all of this, they've been finding us. And they're finding me on LinkedIn, and they're finding us and saying, we don't want you guys to go. So the voters want the voters. I can tell you that. If we put this to an initiative and said to the Redwood City, look, all you have to do is come up with parking. And right down the road, there's federal parking for the Bay Area, the open space across, they're restoring the wetlands. There is space for parking down there on the street. The city has a right to have part of this road that goes in. It was the Leslie Salt easement, and it's private now at 1 Uccelli. The city could make that its street sidewalk. So there are options here, and there is so much room for compromise. And really, I just feel that, 2 days before we were told, it was just assumed. And it's been like this since the 50s. It was assumed that they really feel they own that. It's been described in the press by Mr. Hanning as an ironclad 49-year lease that she has absolute rights over. And so I think really that what I want to say is please don't allow the current, what we've heard potential for, is that the current money collection, there's members of the assembly that are involved in this, and we know politically that there may be a desire to, go down the road of looking at all the facts, the good faith, et cetera, and there may be a potential for settlement on that. We'd really like to say, please don't bring this privatization into that settlement. Please consider it the separate action that it is for public comment. And finally, and I think probably the most important thing that I came here for is to ask, and I know we're not on the agenda today, and so I don't expect this today, but sometime between the commission and the staff over the next few weeks, and to see if there's some way we could keep the status quo. So it is true that the Inner Harbor is now, the act deeded it to Pete. If you look at old maps, the slough wrapped around, and it was Smith Slough. And so that's been resolved by the act now, and they can have that. I want to say that next door, the Villas, has 150 residents, and 3 have boats. That it is very much, maybe 5 tops. It's a 2 to 3% of this 411, and if it gets reduced to 360 or something, they're going on the 40 density units per acre and making an argument that there's no way they can make money with fewer than that. And they also have residences planned in the 100-foot BCDC space. So I'm really calling this a place map. What it was intended to do is to give them a vested map for the most that they could ask for 2 years. When they built down the road at one marina, they closed, somebody else will talk more about this, they closed 400 slips and eliminated 300 of the same type of people, recreational boaters and liveaboards. And this is just vitiating recreational boating in Redwood City. There's nowhere to go. The port commissioner said we were sleeping on Mrs. Uccelli's couch. It has just been awful at the city level. So what I want to say is that if there's any opportunity, here's the timeline. We're told that we need to be out by January 15th. We will face eviction proceedings under the threat of attorney's fees. Our appeal is heard 2 weeks later. There is a State Land Commission meeting in February. We hope that they would have, applied for this permit to have an amendment to change the use. They might not do that for Lord knows how long. And we are prepared. We have, I happen to be an attorney. We have internet, startup people. We have investment. We have Vietnam vets that are on a very regular income and they pay their rent. We're prepared to get insurance. We're prepared to pay rent in escrow. We're prepared to show you who we are and that we can, in good faith, these people have been taking care of this place like it's their own home for 20 years. And so that's what we're asking for, is some kind of status quo, some indication. We know that it takes months to work out all of the complexities of this. There is the act, a judgment, 2 leases. There's a legislative intent, and I've gone and found it all. And, I have the letter from the governor. This is what I want to say. In the act, it was never proposed that in front of the legislature was the privatization for residential use of public trust land. So the act absolutely does not give that. It was like there's the construction, statutory and contract construction that, and anything that what's not before a judge is not decided. This was not before the legislature. It was not decided.
Who authored the act?
So it was Dominic Cortese. I believe his son is an elected official in Santa Clara County and is on the BCDC now. And we haven't heard, anything from him. And the year before, I would say, I have the letter here to the governor. The year before, it was Naylor. There were 2 nays. I think one of them was Maxine Waters. And I can give you everything I brought today because I have copies of it. Are there any questions that I can answer?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.